Not on here. Hi, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to this Growth Week 2022 session on climate smart technology. My name's Taylor, and a session today. And yes, that's a little bit better, a bit louder. So the session is asking a bit of an impossible question that obviously we cannot cover in 1 hour and 15 minutes of discussion. It is, what are the innovations we need for tackling the climate crisis? But we are going to attempt a response, and we have quite a diverse panel to help us do so. We're going to be starting off with a sort of framing keynote by our colleague, Dr. Antoine de Chez-le-Prêtre, who is a senior economist at the OECD. We will also then be having a sort of profiling and sort of deep dive into some technologies that are working across both the adaptation and the mitigation space. So we'll be joined by Dr. Khalid Duri from African Bamboo, Dr. Mei-Kyung Lee, who is the CEO of Energy Life, Ms. Madeleine Bresger from Merck Water Solutions, and then we'll be wrapping up with Mr. Nathan Shukla from Climate AI, and we'll hopefully then have a little bit of time for some Q&A and some discussion. I'm just going to offer up a couple of framing thoughts. Here at GGGI, we work, I think the word innovation is at times automatically tagged to technology. And I think here we are focusing more on technology, but I think in GGGI, we do focus across a range of innovations, some of which are technological and others which are less technological. So I guess I wanted to just kind of highlight a couple of key thoughts to get us going with that sort of background thought in mind, as I'm in charge of the adaptation portfolio for the organization, and the technological innovations are usually quite low tech for adaptation. And so the technological approaches are typically used to scale and impact. So that was, and I think a lot of what we're seeing really in the in the innovation space is that the research and development is still very much focused in the private sector, and in particular in the consumer sector. So the innovation literature that you can read today really points to most innovations, most of the spending coming out of the private sector, and innovations such as the iPhone coming out of NASA, so US public funded research, for example. We're seeing significantly more investment in mitigation technologies rather than adaptation measures. I think that's not surprising, as mitigation typically speaks to much more privatizable goods such as energy and waste. Adaptation being more about the sort of common good. And then also another point I think is interesting to highlight is that most of these innovations are being developed in the global north and in China, which are not the countries that are experiencing the brunt of the climate crisis. So there's a key question around the spread and the absorption of technologies. In any case, I just wanted to highlight a couple of those key points from our side. I think we'll hear a lot more about these issues in detail in particular from our first speaker, Dr. Antoine de Chez-le-Prêtre, and I will not delay any further before passing over to him. Thank you, Antoine.
Yes. Hello, Nicholas. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot for inviting me, and hello to all the attendees. Let me share my screen. I mean, the few points that you just made are extremely important. I'm not going to cover this aspect, in particular the international technology diffusion, but I fully agree with you that it's an extremely important aspect, given that, as you just said, I mean, the vast majority of climate-related innovation, including in adaptation, actually, are developed in the global north and China, which is not where they are perhaps most needed, considering the impact of climate change going forward, but also where we expect the bulk of the emissions growth to occur in the coming decades. Okay, can you see now some slides, perhaps? Trying to put them in full screen mode. Is it working?
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay. I have two screens here, so sometimes it shows the the weird presentation mode with black things, but that's not what you're seeing. You're seeing the full screen. Okay, excellent. So yeah, I was asked by Nicholas to give a bit of an overview. You call it a keynote, but let's say it's to frame the discussion, I guess, because I'm not an engineer myself. I'm an economist, so I leave it to engineers and modelers perhaps to tell us what are the key technologies that we need to tackle the climate crisis. What I'll do is more of a very broad introduction to the topic, and in particular the main point that I will make here is the importance of public policies that directly target innovation for climate neutrality. I think we need to do much more of this direct support to innovation and scaling up, obviously, and then we'll in the rest of the session we'll see some practical technology examples that are perhaps more directly related to the title of the session. So yeah, let me just start by making a few points on why do we so dearly need innovation policies for climate neutrality. There's a number of reasons for that, but the basic fact is that the net zero target requires a really major breakthrough, in terms of the technologies we're using to consume energy, to produce it across all sectors. I mean, net zero means net zero, so basically no one can hide, and that means a structural transformation, a massive technological shift across the whole economy. And this graph comes from the IEA net zero scenario, and you can see clearly these different technologies necessary across all sectors of the economy, basically. But I think another very interesting result from this IEA net zero scenario is that if you look at the 2030 objectives, which is day after tomorrow, we already have most of the technologies we need to reach our 2030 objective, along the way toward the 2050 net zero target. We just need to accelerate the diffusion, but their current cost is sufficiently low already that it can already be diffused. We just need to do it much more rapidly. But when you look at the 2050 objectives, this is where things become much more complicated. And in fact, in that scenario, half of the reduction in 2050 would have to come from technologies that are still in the lab. They're still at the demonstration or prototype phase, in particular in the industry sector, also the energy sector when it comes to hydrogen, for example, or transportation and so on. And that's something you see across the board. I mean, we did a study on the Netherlands last year, looking at the decarbonization of their manufacturing industry, and you can see that they can reach part of these by adopting more energy efficient production processes, by obviously adopting more renewables, because that's key for electrification. But they also need a lot of carbon capture and storage. They need a lot of bio products that are still really still in the lab, bio-based feedstock and the like, and they need also a huge amount of hydrogen if they are to reach their targets, and then hydrogen, green hydrogen is still not cost competitive, obviously, with fossil-based hydrogen. So there's a lot of technological improvements that are necessary there so that this can actually happen to reduce the cost of these technologies. Let me skip this. So the reason innovation is so critical is that it's key to reduce the cost of these low carbon technologies and make them cost competitive with the fossil-based alternatives. This has been the case for renewable energy technologies of the last couple of decades. That's probably, at least in my opinion, the main, if not the only good news on the climate front globally over the last decade, is this massive drop in the cost of renewables, but also, batteries have experienced the same kind of cost decrease, which make them now, cost competitive with fossil fuel based power, and that of course is exactly what we need now, because then of course you don't need any climate policies. The market will do the job if the cheapest technologies are the clean ones. So that's why innovation is so critical, and then of course from a policy perspective it's great because that means it can also these innovation policies that trigger these cost decreases mean you don't have to have such stringent or such ambitious other policies like carbon pricing, for example, which the OECD has been advocating for many years along a multiple of economists, but we know how difficult, politically this is to implement. Obviously, we know the distributional effects, on a poorer household and so on. And so obviously, if you don't need that high carbon prices to reach the target, that's obviously great news. And so these innovation policies, they are also typically extremely well accepted, socially speaking. I mean, we did a survey recently, which you can read online, asking people about, well, many things, but in particular the preferences for various climate policies. And you can see here that, subsidies to low carbon technologies, they are typically always the most preferred policies, by people across both high income and middle income countries. So that's of course, very important arguments from a political perspective, obviously alongside the more, traditional economic arguments. I mean, we will see a lot of it, I think, in this session, but these technologies face a large number of, barriers that have well been identified in the literature, which all, justify government intervention. Okay, the second point that I want to make or look at is that we're not moving fast enough. Unfortunately, that's very clear from all the data that we collect. You mentioned low-tech innovation, so of course patent data is not a great measure of this, but when we look at the more frontier type of innovation as measured by patent filings in low-carbon technologies, what you can see here, it's a bit of a depressing graph, but what you can see here is there's been, since 2011, 2012 or so, at the global level, a decrease in the share of patent filings that are targeting, that relate to low carbon technologies as a share of total patenting. You can see that various agreements didn't make much of a difference there, and crucially, this decrease in low carbon innovation, we observe it across all of the major innovation producing countries, which you mentioned, US, China, Japan, Korea, France, Germany, all here. You can look at, other countries, but, it's really a major global trend affecting all low carbon innovators. You look at other measures of low carbon innovation. One way to do this is to look at venture capital funding for low carbon startups, or startups developing new solutions for the climate crisis. You can see that there was a large increase in VC funding flowing to these firms in the early 2010s, but that has kind of slowed down recently, and also as a share of global VC funding, it's in fact very stable since 2010. I mean, it's about 10% of global VC funding which goes to green, low carbon startups, but that hasn't increased, and of course, there's a lot of the innovations for future. They're coming from these small, young, innovative companies. So more investment into these is of course very, very important. So why have we seen this decrease in low carbon innovation? Well, I think one of the major reasons has been the drop of the fossil fuel prices. The oil price really went down in the years 2010. So of course, the trend has completely reversed, in particular with the crisis in the war in Ukraine. But that had also started before that. So, I think we will see also potentially a reversal of this negative trend in low carbon innovation going forward. But that was probably one of the main explanations. But, I mean, beside the drop in energy price, we've also observed also a slowdown in the increase in climate policy stringency globally, and that's what clearly is shown by this environmental or climate policy stringency indicators that you can see on the left-hand side, which we developed at the OECD. You can see massive increase in the years 2000, and then very stable in the years 2010. Not much of an increase there. So a slowdown in these, in the ambition of these new policies. And as we know, carbon pricing is still very weak globally for political reasons, but that of course, doesn't help. And as for the more innovation specific policies, if you look at, for example, public expenditures in low carbon R&D across IEA member countries, which is close to OECD member countries, you can see it's been very stable as a share of GDP over the past 30 years or so, at about 0.03% of GDP, and you don't see much of an increase. So that's of course very problematic. It's also much lower than what it used to be in the early 80s after the second oil shock. So that of course is a reason for concern. And I think it's especially striking, how little we spend on R&D, on public R&D to these technologies, when you compare that with how much public money is spent on the diffusion of technologies. I mean, if you look at renewables, for example, focus on the EU, at the bottom of that graph, you can see that for €1 of public money spent on public R&D in renewables, €150 are spent on the deployment, supporting the deployment of these technologies. So I'm not saying we should not spend that money on deployment. It's great, these are technologies that require this, but the balance, doesn't seem right, and we should do much more, I think, on the R&D front as well. Okay. Listen, Nicholas, I think I don't have much time left, so I'll just, conclude by saying one thing. In my opinion, the number one objective of climate policy should be to reduce the costs of these low carbon-free technologies, okay, to make them competitive with high carbon alternatives. That should be the number one priority, because basically when this happens, you don't need any climate policy at all, okay? The market will do the job. If these technologies are the cheaper ones, these are the technologies that will be adopted by companies and households. And for this reason, these innovation industrial policies should really be the cornerstone, I think, of carbon neutrality strategies. That I think is something I'm trying to push at the policy level. I mean, we've heard for many years we need a global carbon price, things like this, which we know won't happen, or at least not sufficiently rapidly for it to have an impact. And so what we, I think, should focus on now is, supporting directly all these companies that create these new technologies, supporting their deployment. And then, once we have this cost reduction, and we can always have a carbon tax, something like this to deal with residual emissions. But I think that should be our priority right now. There's many ways to do this. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I think it really goes through direct support to R&D and innovation, rather than more horizontal support, which then we tend to favor the more advanced technologies at the expense of the more radical breakthrough technologies, which we also dearly need for the carbon neutrality objective. Of course, you also need all these, framework conditions, complementary policies. You can't achieve everything just by innovation and industrial policy. But I think, that should be one important objective, and one of the important discussions to be had at COP27. We're already seeing with, for example, in the US, the Inflation Reduction Act, which has a lot of, direct support to innovation and deployment. I think this is probably the way to go. I mean, we're seeing also this in Europe with the Power EU and so on. And I think that is, good news, because these are politically acceptable policies, and they will, I think, make a huge difference in terms of cost reduction, deployment, and getting there slowly. Okay, I'll stop here. Thanks again for the invitation, and I'm looking forward to watching the other presentation and discussing and taking questions, obviously, at the end. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Antoine. That's a really a lot of information and not many slides, but very well summarized and packaged up for a diverse audience. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. And I think it's also great that you are already bigging up the entrepreneurs, a number of which we have on this panel. So without any further delay, I'm going to pass over to Mr. Khaled Duri, who will present on his bamboo technology. Mr. Duri, are you with us?
Yes, I hope you can hear me. And hi, everyone.
Yes, perfect.
Oh,
welcome.
And I'll share my presentation. And yeah, it's going to be much different than the presentations that you've heard. It will be an overview of a business case. So just give me a moment. I'll quickly share and we start. So I hope you can see it. Just to give you an overview, the presentation is about a specific business case to do with the bamboo plant and a force to market business case. So it involves not only the processing technology, but also meeting the performance standards to get market access to highly developed market. Yeah. And I've taken the case of Ethiopia, and also I've taken the current constructional material challenges and opportunity. Yeah. Since Corona, if you look at the demand and the price hikes, that's really a lot for construction material in Europe and North America to a large extent. And if you look at the tree cover loss year by year, it's really a lot. So you can see the numbers, 26 million hectares. But it's not only that, but also because of additional housing requirement, additional building requirements, and also due to building back greener and building back better, there's a much higher demand for wood as a construction material, and all of that has resulted in a huge price hike. Yeah. So one way of doing it is doing what we've been doing, or another way of doing it is trying to use a plant that replenishes itself, that sequesters or removes more carbon than comparable trees, by linking it to the market. Yeah. So what does our solution include? It includes 4 different advanced technologies. The main bottleneck in any production is the pressing technology. So we have a pressing technology that's cuts the processing time by half, or twice as fast, in other words. I'll get into detail a bit more. We have a resin application method that reduces material usage by a third, and end-to-end process, we have energy savings slightly more than a third, and the whole manufacturing happens using machine learning and artificial intelligence, because bamboo is a natural material, so it's naturally variable. So to make sure the end product is consistent, we use machine learning for it. Yeah. Some of the products, and these are just highlights. Yeah. Scrimber board. These can be used for cladding, for decking, but also for CLT, window frames, door frames, roof rafters, wall panels. Yeah. So really for building and construction material. Veneer, again, multiple application, particle board, mainly for decorative and furniture use. Yeah. But you can see that there's a lot of carbon saving, and there's a lot of displacing of use of diesel fuel, because we use the process residues to incinerate or to generate thermal energy. Yeah? So I hope I'm not going too fast, but ultimately there is a process of converting the raw material to something like a board. Yeah, or what you can see in my hand. So let's go to the next slide. The opportunities is immense, as you also saw on the first slide. So in terms of advanced material, you can see that the demand is greater than a trillion euros annually. In terms of the construction center, year to year, the annual increase is very high. And there's a general pattern of wanting to build using natural materials as opposed to cement, steel, aluminum, or glass. Yeah. So in terms of advanced materials, we have at different TRL levels about 10 advanced materials that we've developed, but there's more. Yeah. In terms of advanced technologies, and then we're thinking of Africa, so it's really not like super high tech technology, but basic technology that's smart. Yeah. So some of the processing technologies I talked about, it could be pressing, it could be gluing, it could be drying, it could be fiber extraction. Yeah. So and then if we have the right technologies, it means ultimately we bring in cost efficiency and material efficiency. Because of any wood-like or fiber-based products like this, they lock in carbon. So we can harvest carbon in 4 areas. One is in the end product. The second one is in the processing technology. The third one is in the plantation or restoration. Yeah. and there's a lot of carbon in that respect as well. And the last one is any efficiency gains that we make. Yeah. So let me go on to the next slide. So the business model that we're proposing is it's not only a manufacturing play, but you can consider it like an IP play. So sharing our know-how and licensing our technology, but also a forestry play because it's not a monoculture forest. Bamboo can be planted and grown with other trees and other plants, and so it encompasses everything from forest to market. Yeah. So it's a forestry play, it's a manufacturing play, and an IP play. So effectively we have 3 business cases and an overall business case. So let me go to the next slide. The potential revenue streams is similar to the business cases. So there is revenue to be generated from sale of products. There's revenue to be generated from licensing the IP, meaning the manufacturing technology or the advanced material, and there's also revenue to be generated from carbon sales. And yeah, we can get into specifics, but yeah, let me just give an overview, and then we can come back to it. Here, what I would like to show is beyond our business case, how scalable or replicable the work that we've done to date is. So if you compare Africa to China, China has about twice as much bamboo compared to Africa, and it has a huge industry, about 60 billion. And if you look at the case in Africa, that has half the bamboo, but no economy derived out of bamboo. So what we're trying to do in Ethiopia is really something that is new. It's a pioneer, and if we're able to demonstrate it in Ethiopia, then the ability to replicate it in no less than 12 African countries is high, and the economic value is huge, 13 billion. The job creation is huge, in millions. The carbon sequestration is huge. So it's really something that is underutilized, untapped, and that's highly scalable. Yeah, but to reach to that stage, governments need to establish an enabling environment, and these are some of the areas that we've identified in terms of establishing common units of measurement for bamboo sales, so that it can be made on a weight basis as opposed to on a tube basis. Building up capacity in terms of training, giving the right framework for carbon rights and land rights, not only for manufacturing entities, but also for communities and smallholder farmers that are growing bamboo, building up the value chain, and also adopting carbon and forestry standards. So our theory of change is anchored on transforming the industrial bamboo sector. The challenges are very clear. There's in terms of the global construction industry, there's a huge demand to replace fossil-based materials. What I mentioned earlier, concrete structures, concrete-based buildings, or steel, or aluminium or glass, to bio-based materials, and the materials that I'm mentioning earlier, the advanced materials, all of them open up opportunities for circularity. So we can dispose of them at the end of life, because they're biodegradable. So we don't have to think of an industrial solution. So these are the challenges that we're trying to address. The activities that we've been undertaking to date is really trying to attract capital to this area, and there's not enough capital because capital goes after something that is already proven, something established, and something with positive cash flow. So attracting or unlocking capital is very challenging. Working with different forestry standards such as FSC to adopt it to bamboo, this is also challenging, and also finding linking up with buyers, established buyers in advanced economies in Europe and in America. It's also challenging, but these are the three areas that we've worked in. And some of the outputs that we've achieved is, so we have the business model, we have tools that we've developed because risk is something that investors and DFIs want to understand and scrutinize better. We have models in terms of operational models for forest management plan or factory operation, but also for environmental and social measurement as well. And we've come up with also methodology for carbon footprint calculations, carbon offset calculations. In the longer term, the outputs and the impacts that we expect just with our intervention, you can see it there. So we intend to benefit large communities. We intend to lock in substantial amount of carbon, 2 million tons, and hopefully kickstart the restoration of 2 million hectares. It doesn't mean that we're doing it by ourselves. Others are doing it, but we could be the catalyst. And largely the impact throughout Africa, this is what we foresee within 10 years. In terms of adaptation and mitigation, there's some figures here, and these are some of the highlights in terms of carbon sequestered, land restored, and in terms of SDGs, again, additional highlights. And I will, this is something that we prepared for investors, and this is the trajectory. So let me stop here, and this is who we are, and I guess my time is up, so thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Duri. That was just a super interesting. I think also you're speaking to the right public here, because especially in GGGI, we have offices in those countries, and this enabling environment is really what we work on. So I think there are many follow-up conversations to be had. I'm going to now rapidly pass over to Dr. Mek-Young Lee from Energy Life for her presentation. Thank you very much.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me well? Plus, okay, thank you. I'm Mek-Young Lee. I'm the founder and CEO of Energy Life. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to thank GGGI Secretariat and Nicholas for giving me an opportunity to present GGGI Week 2022. Well, the topic I'm presenting tonight is smart aquaculture with renewable energy and artificial intelligence for tackling climate, energy, food crisis. Next slide, next please. Before I move on to today's topic, let me briefly introduce my company, Energy Life. Our vision is to achieve carbon neutrality and protect the Earth's environment with clean energy and artificial intelligence, AI. We farm energy and aquaculture with artificial intelligence. Next, please. Well, many countries, many developing countries especially, They face a triple crisis: climate risk, energy crisis, and food crisis. With regard to climate risk, increased risk of climate change impact, such as rising temperatures, reduced water availability, flooding, and other adverse weather events. The frequency of all types of extreme weather events has increased, but on the other hand, the interval of them has decreased. For food crisis, food security and livelihood heavily depend on agriculture and aquaculture, which depend on nature, and the use of inefficient resources such as energy, water, feed, it reduces productivity. With regard to the energy crisis, the increase in energy prices and the use of high-cost fossil fuel-based power generation, it made energy prices more volatile and energy supply more vulnerable. Next, please. Well, this year, many countries, especially many developing countries and people across the continent had suffered from extreme weather events. Pakistan, 1/3 of Pakistan has been completely submerged by historic flooding. The summer rain is the heaviest recorded in a decade and is blamed by the government on climate change. And Africa and Ethiopia. Ethiopia faces multiple pressing crises, including a catastrophic drought, which has affected 24 million people. Hurricane, especially Latin America, it is expected that climate disasters in Latin America threaten to drive 6 million into poverty in next decade. And Latin America has many natural disasters, from volcanic eruptions, drought, and heat waves to regular flooding brought on by tropical storms and hurricanes. Next, please. Next, yes, thank you. This year, India had suffered extreme weather event. The temperature of some regions exceeded 50 degrees Celsius, 122 degrees Fahrenheit. And high temperatures continued through the following months and into June, peaking near 50 degrees Celsius. In response to extreme high temperature, the Indian government recently imposed a ban on wheat export. In Europe, heat waves have become more frequent and more intense and last longer because of human-induced climate change. And fires have destroyed huge areas of mountain and nature across the European continent. Next, please. And climate, water, land, energy, food, these basic needs for human being and living are interconnected. It can negatively affect each other and increase severe effects on the earth and our life. Next, please. Next, I will discuss challenges in aquaculture. Climate change is reducing the size of several species of fish on lakes and ocean. Global climate change may be contributing to water temperature and water input of lake and sea, where majority of fishers gain fish catches from aquaculture and fishing. In Africa, especially Lake Victoria, the second largest lake in the world, East African countries, including Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda, with the negative impact on the livelihoods of millions of people who depend on fishing for food and income. It has been reported that indigenous fish species have shrunk in size because of increase in temperature in the water bodies. With regarding energy consumption, fish farms consume energy a lot, either through electricity or fuel. High power consumption of farms increase operating costs, demanding to achieve carbon neutrality and transition to an eco-friendly system has increased. The demand of aquaculture water treatment, resource efficiency, and eco-friendly management system also has increased across the continent. Next, please. And many international organizations, including World Bank and researchers from academia, they have research on the impact of climate change on fish and aquaculture in terms of water ecosystem and food security. A couple of projects in climate adaptation in Lake Victoria have been implemented concerning climate change and ecosystem on the water. Next, please. So I'd like to say the paradigm shift with the smart technology and digital technology and AI, artificial intelligence, it is needed to tackling three crises: climate, energy, and food crisis. For the climate risks, nowadays, most of aquaculture is fully dependent on nature and environment since the farm is located in outside. It should be moved to inland, and more inland farm needed to be increased. Whether the farm is indoors, outside, or offshore, it is inevitable to preemptively respond to the weather. Artificial intelligence can analyze past weather patterns and predict weather, and it can contribute farm operation responding weather event. For the energy issue, more renewable energy such as solar PV needed to be utilized to reduce energy cost and emission. Using renewable energy, it can also increase profitability and strengthen competitiveness. It can also reduce energy supply vulnerability. Next, please. The picture on the left side shows the current methodology of the fish farm, and the images on the right, it shows the aquaculture system that needs to be pursued and shifted. What's important is that innovative technologies and solutions for aquaculture with renewable energy and artificial intelligence is that it should pursue climate resilient, sustainable, self-sufficient, and productive, so that it can contribute to solve triple crisis. It should be data-driven, predictive, precision, clean energy-based system. Next, please. In developing countries, especially Africa, the fisheries and aquaculture sector need digital transformation ultimately. It can increase productivity and industry competitiveness. More importantly, digital technologies can bring fishers and industry workers more profit, and it can contribute to nutrition, protein provision for people. Next, please. Well, I showed the circle of a triple crisis in the beginning of my presentation. With artificial intelligence technologies and renewable energy, the global society can shift this crisis into more resilient society. Not climate risk, but climate resilient. Not food crisis, but food self-sufficiency. Not energy crisis, but sustainable energy. Next, please. Well, the before one. Yes, thank you. Energy Life, our company, will provide innovative solution through our technologies and service solutions to the people across the globe. We have excellent team and develop technologies to solve problems and to contribute to carbon neutrality and resilient society. Next, please. Well, climate change, in terms of climate change, the effect of climate change are already felt across continents, especially Africa. And Africa especially must take action to mitigate the impact of climate change and build resilience. Diversifying energy sources and investing in renewable energy will help reduce emissions, improve energy security, and also create jobs. Artificial intelligence is a critical tool that can solve many of the continent's challenges. AI, artificial intelligence, it can be used to improve aquaculture productivity, weather forecasting, energy access, and education. The need for developing countries, especially Africa, to build its data capacity and AI capacity to reap the benefit of this transformative technology. And digital technology is essential, of course, for developing countries, especially Africa, to realize its full potential. It can help to improve efficiency, transparency, and accountability, while also reducing the cost of doing business. Next, please. Well, Energy Life, we have collaborated with a number of international organizations and domestic organizations where we'll be implementing projects to contribute to our climate resilient society. Next, please. I think is the last slide saying thank you, but we don't see the slide. Yes, yeah. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. That's again an express deep dive into some very innovative approaches to one of the very common challenges we've also seen through our climate smart agriculture projects. So we have some questions in the chat, but if we're going to try and deal with them at the end, if that's all right. So we're actually going to pass over to our next panelist, Ms. Madeline Bresger from Merckwater.
Great, thank you so much. I hope you can all hear me well.
Perfectly.
Great. Just gonna share my presentation. Great. So good afternoon and good evening. My name is Madeline Bresger, and I'm the Africa Business Development Manager at Merckwater Solutions. We're an Australian company, but we have our roots in Germany. Our mission as a company is to bring clean water to those in need using sustainable water treatment solutions. And we work with Australian farmers, and we work with communities in the Pacific and in Africa. And since I'm the Africa Business Development Manager, I'll be focusing on projects in Africa during my presentation. In regards to our approach, we use renewable energy to operate the units. We emphasize an iterative design, which means that we base new projects on lessons learned from previous projects. And we try to adapt each project to the local specifications as much as possible. In order to ensure longevity of our projects, we work very closely together with the local community through partnerships, and we focus on capacity building and training. We use solar and wind power, but we can also use the units on grid if preferred. As with everything, there are pros and cons to using renewable energy. So there are a couple of things that we need to consider. Firstly, there are two advantages. Using renewable energy reduces our reliance on diesel, and we have lower operating costs. On the other hand, our CAPEX is higher, and being dependent on renewable energy limits the operating hours of the units. However, as this graph shows here, in the long run, it does pay off to initially invest in renewable energy. As mentioned, our aim is to keep getting better and to keep offering better products. Our units are easy to operate and to service. The units come in a container, or we place them in a small building to keep them safe from vandalism. The units are portable and thus very easy to transport, and the units are rugged, robust to make sure they aren't easily damaged. And it's a simplified construction. And as mentioned, we really try to learn from each project that we implement. Our aim is to integrate the unit in the community by empowering and training key people to operate and service the unit. Local capacity building is one of our key missions as a business, and we see it as key and crucial to ensure the sustainability of our projects. It's also important for us to empower the younger generations of the local communities. We work with different tiers. On a basic level, we train daily operators from the local community to operate the unit on a day-to-day basis. On a higher level, we work with local vocational centers to equip regional service technicians with the expertise to oversee several projects. And then those service technicians are supported by our MERC engineers. Now I'd love to show you how all of this looks in reality through real projects from Zanzibar. I was just there last month, and it's always exciting to see the projects and to see the people face to face. To give you some context, in Stone Town, in Zanzibar town, people pay about $1.70 for a 20-liter jerry can of water. There is a governmental water supply system, but it doesn't cover all of the islands. And in the cities, they have meters and they pay per use, but in the villages, they pay a flat rate of about $2. And the government is planning on expanding the system and introducing meters everywhere. But that's still in the process. And in the villages, people also get the water from wells, but sometimes the water quality is rather questionable. Here we have our first case study, our first project. This is in Buyu, which is a couple minutes south of Zanzibar town. We have one operator who's a local farmer, and he's operating the unit on a day-to-day basis. He's deciding, or he decides on the pricing, and he calls the service technicians when something bigger needs to be fixed. As of now, he's charging about 20 cents for 20 liters, which is less than what people pay in the city. And he could be selling it for even less, but he has seen that people are willing to pay higher amounts for clean and reliable water, so he's upped the price. The unit is a 120 liter hour unit. It's currently running on grid, but he has the option to upgrade it to solar power. The unit currently serves a community of about 200 people, and we can already see significant improvements in people's lives, economically, socially, and in regards to their health. Our second case study is in Uzi. The model is a little bit different. We have a water committee, which is administered by the government. People pay about 9 cents for a 20-liter jerry can, and we have 3 200 liter per hour units in 3 different locations. They're all solar powered, and it serves a community of about 2,000 people. And we can also already see significant improvements in people's lives, which at the end of the day is what we want to do, to improve people's lives of these communities. Now, last case study. For over 10 years, we have been working with a local NGO called Pamoja Zanzibar, and their water department are our service technicians, and we're in close communication with them. It's a vocational training center, and on their property at that center, they also have a water treatment unit, and the students, staffs, and locals get the water for free. They also run a garage, so there is quite a lot of traffic also from outsiders who come and get water, and they charge expats for the water, but locals aren't charged. And so the NGO also gets an income through the servicing costs of the units that they supervise. In regards to, this one is solar powered and wind powered. In regards to the impact, MERC Water trains and offers ongoing support for the water department. So we help to build up the local capacities and expertise. And we really rely on this close partnership to ensure the sustainability of all of our regional projects. To summarize, Mark Water uses renewable energy, which is worth the investment in the long run. We make sure to offer better products and models by learning from each project. And one of our key missions is training and capacity building of the local communities. And it's important for us to include important stakeholders in order to ensure the project is accepted, integrated in the community, and we can offer clean water to the local people in the long run. If you would like to hear more, please visit our website or send us an email, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madeline. That's fantastic. We'll move swiftly on to our next speaker. We had originally shortened this session by a little bit for scheduling reasons, but we can actually go over by a few minutes if needed. So to our next speaker, Nathan, do not worry, you do not have to rush yourself. So just handing over to you, Mr. Nathan Shukla from Climate AI. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nicholas. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, very well.
Perfect. Well, I'll go ahead and just get my presentation going here. Give me one moment just to pull that up. All right, just a quick check that folks are able to see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to be talking a bit today about Climate AI. I work as the product innovation lead, so per today's topic, I feel like the right person to be here, focusing on innovation, not just within climate, but specifically within Climate AI, this organization. So just a little bit of background. Climate AI is a Stanford born and San Francisco-based climate company. We focus on using artificial intelligence to improve long-term climate forecasting. So looking out 10 to 70 years into the future, as well as doing some novel forecasting from a weekly and monthly perspective. So not just looking out 14 days into the future, but also looking 6 months out into the future. For us, we really built this company acknowledging that climate change is a now problem, not just a future problem for lots of organizations. There have been a lot of stories today already about the immediate impacts of climate change, thinking about different economic consequences, such as the cost of reconstruction. It's happening every year, $300 billion or more in response to extreme weather events. Numerous extreme weather events all across the globe. Thinking recently in the past year, things like the Pacific Northwest heat dome. If you're all familiar, we're in the North America. Excessive heats ended up costing almost 1,400 lives, $9 billion in economic activity for an event that really only happened a couple of days, largely because the population there was completely caught off guard, an extreme event that was not expected to happen really at all in that corner of the world. As well as what's been mentioned a couple of times, compounding problems with supply chains due to geopolitical stressors like the Russia-Ukraine war. And increasingly, organizations thinking about how they have to adapt to climate change given disclosure requirements like the SEC's climate ruling and other institutions. And for us, all that really boils down to is, in a lot of ways, the next 20 years of climate impact are really already fixed, not just from the regulatory perspective, but also from the amount of CO2 that's in the atmosphere. So really already starting to see the manifestations of climate now. And so for us, we really built this technology with the goal of helping organizations start to think about this next 5 to 10 years of impact and how can we better model so that folks can start to make their supply chains more resilient. And I'll give a couple of case studies at the back end. But just to give you a sense, so climate AI, as I mentioned, we've built really two different types of technologies. One that's focused on daily and monthly forecasting, where a lot of the customers that use these technologies, they range from growers on the field who are using our system to help them anticipate agricultural stressors. So within our tool, we allow for farmers, producers, seed companies, etc., to anticipate extreme weather events, whether that's droughts, lack of precipitation, extreme heat, extreme cold, soil temperatures, really a large range of different parameters that might be important, just so that they can anticipate and improve how they respond as a business or respond as a community to these extreme weather events. And for us, that seasonal and weekly forecasting really is a kind of a first of its kind technology. A lot of organizations work with us just because up until now, doing monthly forecasting has been really either quite hard or quite unreliable. And so we see anywhere from a 30 to 40% improvement on existing public models just for those monthly forecasting, so that there's a lot more confidence looking out into the future. In addition, as I mentioned, we also have a tool that we refer to as our Climate Insights platform, which focuses on the longer term 10 to 70 years out into the future. And what I'll go through a little bit later is a couple of case studies within agriculture. So we primarily work within the agricultural space, but we have organizations that work with us in building materials, in finance, and many other kind of sectors. But one of the key elements for us is how can we take climate science, which can be this big complex data challenge or big complex scientific endeavor, and turn it into business insights and business metrics. So a lot of what we do within the Climate Insights tool is not just giving a higher accuracy of forecasting for climate change into the future, but also translating it into things like agricultural yield increases or decreases, things like property damage, and things like disruption into supply chains, so that it can drive some material insights for businesses, for leaders of governments, etc. And then the last thing, just as by way of introduction before I get to some of the case studies, we have two additional tools that we also have for organizations. One is referred to as our exposure insights. This is to help organizations specifically as they model things like catastrophic events. While it says 10 years, we actually also do hurricane modeling as well. So one of the most important things for us is not just these weather patterns, but also starting to better anticipate extreme weather events. So doing more sophisticated modeling on cyclones and hurricanes all across the globe, as well as water risks. Increasingly, we're seeing that across many time horizons and time scales, folks are seeing water stress as an incredibly important endeavor. So by bringing on a team of hydrologists, we really build some advanced models to get deeper insights, doing things like monthly and weekly forecasting of drought conditions, not just precipitation, but also inflow and reservoir capture, things of that nature, so that organizations and governments across the globe can anticipate water stress and water shortages. I'll skip this slide for now, but just to say that we do work with, as I mentioned, a lot within the agricultural space. So many organizations across the EU, Australia, South America, and North America. And I'll just go to a couple of case studies in the interest of time. So as an example, within our climate space, as I mentioned, we do a lot of work on long-term forecasting of hazards and water risks as well. So one of the key things that we do for organizations, a great example is we work with a sugar beet manufacturer who's trying to evaluate where they're going to place their new factory, trying to anticipate the lowest overall risk exposure that they would have relative to water availability, things like flooding events and extreme weather events. Taking all of that information, as well as thinking about agricultural productivity of the region around where they're going to be placing this location, to best optimize is a combination of climate hazards, water availability, agricultural productivity, to make the most appropriate site selection when they're trying to evaluate, a 50-year infrastructure improvement or placement of a new processing facility. So really for us, it's being able to help companies to right-size the resilience investments as they make these decisions across the portfolio with some best-in-class water modeling as well as long-term climate modeling as well. Another brief example, this one's more focused on the agricultural space. We work with a company down in Australia, Advanta Seeds, that has used our long-term climate forecasting to help them anticipate shifts in the markets that they have for seeds. In particular, what they were curious about is, based on where they currently sell, what would be the kinds of traits that they would need to breed into the varieties of crop that they are currently selling into those markets. So for instance, if it's selling onions, what are the kind of stressors that might be happening more commonly into the future? Cold stress, heat stress, more drought conditions. What are the kind of things that they can anticipate to be breeding into those crops now, which takes a 5 to 10 year time horizon to potentially get a resilient strain of crop developed, such that they can position that better in the market. So this really helps organizations reduce the uncertainty as they're making decisions about breeding, about varieties that they're going to introduce into crops. And consequently, what we can also do beyond just looking at current locations and what traits they need to be adding in, but also where might they be looking to place their products into the future based on shifts in the climate. The last two examples before I wrap up is on seasonal. Anticipating food scarcity is a huge concern for us. We work with the government of Azerbaijan as well as a major Asian conglomerate to anticipate global supply shocks. We're rolling out with a couple of other governments right now, in fact, to help them anticipate supply chain issues into the future by looking 6 months out at global, regionally productive locations for key crops, in many cases cereals like wheat, where we are evaluating these individual regions for their weather conditions to anticipate yield reductions that are possible across the globe. And through this, helping governments and large entities to lock in forward contracts, get their own supply constraints figured out, and avert scarcity and price inflation. And the last example is demand planning. So we also help organizations, primarily businesses, to anticipate extreme weather events. In this case, we work with a shingles manufacturer in the United States, where we, through our hurricane forecasting, could anticipate the landfall of severe hurricanes in the United States throughout the hurricane season. And this past season, able to kind of hone in that Florida and the Carolinas would be potentially hit more likely than any other state. And so to anticipate that they should be placing shingles for faster reconstruction as a result after the landfall of this event. And so this really helps organizations to better place their products, but also for local disaster managers to anticipate preparedness for their institutions and for their communities so that they can bounce back a lot quicker than normal. And a final note, for those of you that are more organizations are thinking about things like TCFD compliance or disclosing against incoming regulations, a lot of our tools are at the gate really thinking about not just the resilience measures and the business metrics, but also how do we translate this into the necessary disclosure requirements that are being asked by investors, by government agencies, by central banks that are doing stress testing, so that we can really allow for modeling that's both sophisticated but also compliant. So with that, I really appreciate the time and looking forward to the questions.
Thank you very much, Nathan. That's sorry, slight technical difficulty there. Okay, so we've very GGG week style marketplace of scales and approaches here, and it's going to be impossible for us to do justice to the wealth and diversity of the things that we've discussed here today. We started from Antoine, who gave us that really broad policy and market scenarios, like what's going on, what is lacking. We have a couple of quite specific technical questions in the chat. I think I might invite, so we had one question for Dr. Lee in the chat. I would maybe invite her to directly address that in the chat. I wanted to just ask from each of the panelists, so, you know, we're at time, but we can take 5-10 minutes if that's okay with everybody. What would be your sort of, I don't know, like from your, because we have different scales operating here. We have, you know, and different places on the value chain of climate innovation. So what would be your top priorities? I don't know, give me 2 or 3 words, which are, what do you need now to make, because, you know, we're addressing the climate crisis with this talk, so we're thinking big. What would be the sort of top 3 things from your perspective that would be needed to scale what you're doing and to make a difference? Straight back at you, Nathan. Let's start from the bottom and back up to the top.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I would definitely say data. For our perspective, we are an artificial intelligence company, and we are not a hardware company. So we don't run and operate a satellite network. We don't run and operate weather stations. So one of the most important things for us is there's a lot of really great weather data that's out there and available that covers markets that traditionally don't have great data. And for us, tapping into those proprietary weather stations and data points, where more organizations that have made those investments privately, and being able to open source that is really, really critical to really fill some of those gaps overall in the market. I'd also say, candidly, climate science and what we do, while weather forecasting is one of those things where I think climate science is already a little bit of a head scratcher for some folks. And then when you start saying that you can predict it with certain degrees of accuracy, people start staring at you as if you're a magician. And so I think, you know, in a lot of ways, it's about the willingness to do pilots and making sure that there's this sort of co-development and co-innovation process with organizations. We've been very fortunate and very blessed to have 25 customers so far in our short time as a startup. But the more that we can get willing participants in new markets that may be first movers on taking in climate science and using it to make smart business decisions or smart organizational decisions, while that might be scary, it's also incredibly crucial. We really can't wait around to wait for some of these technologies to be completely viable out the gate. Not to say that we're not, but you really kind of need to have those moments of test because we're running up against a clock. And so we can't really wait several years to wait to see if this technology is going to be 100% accurate or 100% viable. Take the dive, take the bet.
That's great. Sorry, that's fantastic. Thank you. Madeline?
Great, thank you. So what we need is partners in regards to financing the capital investments of projects. We need partners to help us open doors to reach new communities and new areas. There's nothing better than having local partners to reach new communities, and for people to give us the opportunity to prove that our solution works and it works in the long run. A lot of people shy away when they see our units or when they hear it's technological, but it works, and we really invest in training and capacity building to make sure that it works and it works in the long run.
Thank you. Dr. Lee?
Oh, yes. I think, sorry. The priority for this tackling climate change and more forward to climate return to society, I think three things: of course, data and affordable hardware to collect and detect the data. And as Madeleine said, was capacity building. So I think that these three are data, affordable hardware, and capacity building. These three things are the most required infrastructure prior to our digital transformation or some basic needs or infrastructure and environment to move forward to a climate return to society. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And Khalid? Mr. Dury? Khalid, are you still with us? I think he might have a communication problem. Antoine?
Yeah, I'm struck by the the word data coming up all the time. We're working currently on the nexus between this digital transition and the climate one, and I think it's the perfect illustration that how digital solutions can contribute to the climate challenge. No, I mean, beyond this, I was listening to all the presentations and these requirements in terms of finding the partners and the investors and so on. I mean, what I'm going to say is a bit general perhaps, but it seems to me that pretty much all governments in the world now, at least representing perhaps 90% of the world economy, have adopted these 2050 net zero targets, and now it's time to go from these targets to the actual implementation and the policies, because that's here, without policy credibility, investment is not going to flow to those firms, but with some reasonable expectation of what the future decade is going to look like in terms of climate policy action, that could happen. So I think that's what we're trying to advocate for among our member countries, and that can take many forms, but innovation policies I mentioned, other policies and capacity building. I'm thinking also skilled and all everything that would be required for the transition. But yeah, this policy credibility over the next decade seems will be my concluding word there.
Thank you, Antoine. Moving back over to Mr. Dury, if he's managed to reconnect. There he is. Did you hear my? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I did not hear your question. Sorry.
The question was, I don't know, your top priorities for scaling and enabling your innovative approach to make that difference. What are the things that are missing?
I think first and foremost is in terms of the raw material, securing the raw material, enabling environment. So legislation, training to the forestry communities, adopting forestry standards, adopting carbon-related standards, specifically carbon rights, and also building some. Okay, and then the second one is building technical capacity, and it could be in a form of a center of excellence or training center, so that the advanced materials and the advanced technologies to scale it across the 12 African countries. There is some center of excellence or something of that nature that's able to intake or in-source the technology in a semi-industrial setup. So it's not a fully production environment, but an environment whereby samples and specimens can be produced, an environment where engineers, innovators, business people, and others, academicians, and so on, can play around. Yeah. These two would be the starting points.
Sorry, I keep unmuting in the wrong place. Thank you all. That was a really, I don't know, personally, as somebody who works a lot on cultivating data, capacity building enabling environments, this is very encouraging, even though it's often seen as the least sexy thing in international development to work on an enabling environment. But anyway, we're going to have to wrap it up there. I really want to thank you all for coming to this extremely diverse panel. We've really covered a lot of ground, but I feel hopefully that there was some cross-pollination there that you all found useful. I hope so, and I hope that we can continue to exchange over email. Have a good day, have a good morning, have a good evening. I know you're joining from different time zones across the world, so thank you so much.